Cool. Do you mind if I record you for my vidcast, data stream? My data stream, it goes out to everyone in the system. It goes into space.
Sure.
Okay, great.
So the New Age Pendleton Ward opus Midnight Gospel dropped on Netflix this past 4/20 into an incredible pool of support. The series being a menagerie of comedian Duncan Trussell's podcast segments set towards whimsical world-building sets up a loose narrative around Clancy, a roving space traveler trying to explore new worlds and find new perspectives for his space cast. It's closest to an episodic comedy in form, but in the overall landscape of adult animation, it may be the signaling of the first few baby steps of an industry changing for the better. The show itself is less a new comedy cartoon and more an animated spiritual experience. Each episode does well, presenting a visual spread that, while strongly identifying overall, takes on a strongly differing environment every time. You can end up on a planet inhabited by dog, deer, or a strangely Victorian medieval clashing woods, or even see the universe itself. But that experience is saved for the last episode, so you might want to gradually work your way up to that one, alright? Most of our subjects present topics and stories that center around the semiotics of life, death, enlightenment, acceptance of the unknown, and the cynical nature of existence itself. A lot of said things you'd be treated to if you listen to more open-ended podcasts. Hell, even Joe Rogan could give you a similar vibe if you really got into it.
Yeah. And then you start running into, I think, which is a really fascinating problem, which is, what if it's all alive and sentient and feeling for real? What if there is throughout the entire universe just a sentient field of consciousness that is interacting with matter in a way that it produces what we call life, and that life is feeling terror, love, maybe in different ways than we would understand it, but it's still there.
If you found that you just can't listen to a podcast and need a better foray into it, this would be a good tool to ease into them. The actual podcasting content and length is kind of slim, but that's cool because the guests make up for it in the sheer amount of ideas and concepts they throw at you each episode.
Never told you this, but made me think about it. So when I was 24, off I went to India. I met Ram Dass over there, and up I went to the Himalayas and finally met my guru. And I said, well, so how do I meditate? Because I was thinking mantra, meditate. I didn't even know what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And he said, meditate like Christ. When he was nailed to the cross, he felt love, not pain. He was lost in love with everything. And then the next day we went back. I got Ram Dass to say, well, how did he meditate? Which is this famous story. And he just went back, closed his eyes, and tears came. And it was right then we experienced Christ.
The last one was a bit slower paced and even kind of encouraged meditative techniques during the show. But the nature of building the narrative around the podcast made for a good time. I heard someone call this a super jail Adventure Time kind of hybrid, and I can definitely feel a bit of the former's energy and the latter's design philosophy in visual and emotional content. I see Midnight Gospel as a great experiment. I don't know how much of it would have been possible without Netflix's backing, Titmouse's involvement, and faith in Penn and Duncan's creative abilities. There surely would have been similar experiments created before, but with Midnight Gospel's size and scale of production being thrust into the forefront of mainstream animation, this is a bigger experiment than ever before in what animated content audiences truly can stomach. A recent paper tendered by a former CEO of Mondo Media compiled a bunch of data that points to promising growth in the age bracket's future. A lot of its conclusions come from well-worn pieces of dogma we've all heard throughout the 2010s. We know that streaming's the future, and the essential 18 to 34 demo are shifting their attention over to digital platforms. There were tidbits that were news to me, such as the portion about producers struggling to meet demands for adult animation. I think many would be unlikely to accept the notion that adult animation can have much more of a global footprint. Many of us do parrot cynical or downright nihilistic attitudes towards the scope of Western adult content due to the proclivity of the animated sitcom format. You know, the Family Guys, or the Brickleberries, or the Big Mouths, or some such spin-offs and reimaginings. Even the unsuccessful products of such ilk are perceived to be way too derivative of the biggest and brightest stars. So, such news that adult content is booming may not be perceived as a sign of broader diversity, but a warning for more of the same. Luckily, it seems that couldn't be farther from the truth. Obviously, there's been a bit more of an acceptance towards different formats of your average raunchy big boy cartoon. As commercial adult content starts to gain more prominence at award shows and expos, the online space has also seen more evolution. With the advent of solo creators with a big online footprint bringing out new favorites like Has-Been Hotel and the Satina series, fans have more power than ever to push content meant for them into the public space. A bit of unexpected news too, the Arab world of animation, among others, have been popping off with new movies and collaborations that wouldn't have even been possible just a few years before. So while there are cool experiments to come from one of Western animation's most polarizing sectors, we also need these audiences to be more receptive of what's being put out there to pull it off. Midnight Gospel, in many ways, is not the conventional modern cartoon, and most comparisons to Adventure Time only apply in a very narrow, superficial sense. It's got a lot to offer, but it's up to critics and general viewers to rally behind it and appreciate it, no matter how far out of bounds it may travel. And as a bit of a loose allegory to where the future of adult animation may lead, the same can apply in spades.